Good evening and welcome to Mental Health, Wellness, and Variety. My name is Richard Weingarten and I'll be your host on tonight's show. For tonight's show, we're going to focus on the epidemic of mass shootings that have occurred this summer throughout the country and the residual effects of gun violence and the COVID pandemic on Connecticut's schools, teachers, children, and their families. Looking back at the carnage that took place at Highland Park during the 4th of July parade, we have all become aware of the gun violence crisis we face, whether we want to or not. But Highland Park was not the only tragedy during the holiday weekend. Boston College historian Heather Cox Richardson, in her July 5th newsletter, reported over a dozen mass shootings the weekend of July 4th that left 15 people dead and 91 injured. Connecticut residents were not spared the violence either. The front page headline in the New Haven Register on July 6th showed that 6 people in New Haven were gunshot victims, including a 5-year-old who was grazed by a bullet and a woman who was killed during the holiday weekend. While we are all heartbroken by these reports, our children are perhaps the group most affected by the attacks in the schools. Children and adults alike witnessed the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, which left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. To illustrate the crisis among school children, the New York Times recently published recorded remarks among school children in response to the gun violence gripping the country. From Litchfield, Connecticut, 15-year-old Matthew Anatoly Raven was quoted as saying, "I don't want to be scared anymore," and he went on to say, "I feel useless, knowing that no matter what I do, I can't change anything. It's out of control, and no one is taking the lead in fixing this issue. Nothing helps me return to the classroom. So many thoughts are stuck in my head. For example, where should I sit to help protect myself if a gunman comes in? Could the person next to me suddenly lose it and let it out on all of us? School is no longer a safe place." Lauren Baker, 16, from Houston, Texas, had this reaction. She said, "The problem is not doors. The problem is that almost any person can obtain a gun capable of mass murder. I pray that each shooting will be a call to action, that there will be a push for change and reform. But I know we are helpless to people in power who refuse to keep us safe. I'm angry that our country allows children to be slaughtered over and over just to protect a nuance of an outdated amendment. I do not have faith in our government to protect anyone." Another student, 16-year-old Agatha Gurman of New York, was quoted as saying, "My mom always says that having your child die before you is a parent's worst nightmare. I guess my way of compartmentalizing is pretending to live in a world we don't. The shooting in Uvalde exposed how sterilized I have become to such horrifying acts of violence. I have slowly become desensitized." It should be stated that Connecticut has some of the most far-reaching gun laws in the country. After the Sandy Hook massacre in 2012, the Connecticut State Legislature, led by then-State Senator Chris Murphy, passed a series of 9 gun control measures, including moving the age permitted to own a handgun up to 21. It allowed assault weapons completely and made parents liable to a felony conviction if they don't lock up their guns. But unfortunately, these laws have not reduced gun violence in Connecticut. A study of gun violence from 2010 to 2020 showed that gun violence has only slightly declined. The gun violence in low-income neighborhoods in Connecticut's largest cities have remained the same, and the gun-related suicides among the elderly have increased considerably. To talk about this maddening situation we face, I am joined by 2 people who have been working in the schools with teachers, children, and families to restore an atmosphere of calm and sanity during the pandemic and mass shootings. We will discuss how to help children open up about their fears and other difficult feelings. We will encourage parents, many of whom deal with their own emotional issues, to create a safe space to discuss mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, fear, isolation, and more with their children. My guests tonight are Dr. Jennifer Duran, President of the Connecticut Psychological Association, and Mr. Jim Cusco, who lost his son Kevin to suicide in February of 2021. Jim is now the co-founder with his wife, Kristen, and president of Kevin's Afterglow Foundation. Jennifer and Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm curious, how do both of you view the gun violence crisis in this country? Jim, what do you think of it?
I guess it's a very a complicated issue. I think in relating to school violence, I think it's usually other children that are performing this, and how they get access to those guns is one of the problems. I would think. I'm a gun owner. I have a safe, and I keep my gun locked up so my children couldn't get at it. But I would have to think there's another, part to it. Some of these kids that have been known. I'd say they were on the radar of authorities. Whether the young man, I forget where it was, but he drew pictures. Somebody helped me, and he was brought in that day, and his parents knew he had a gun, and they didn't do anything about it. So, I mean, situations like that where a parent actually buys a kid who's in trouble a gun, that's not good. And I also think back to the Parkland shooting in, I'd say about 3 or 4 years ago in Florida. This student was known to everyone, and nobody did anything about it. So I think there's part of it, like, people are afraid to do anything about it. Like, if you see something, say something, because I know people who have said something and say something, and they turned around and sued in civil court, and that could do, and it makes people not want to help or anything. Almost that's why you probably see there's less good Samaritans now. Now you see people, if there's a fight, nobody breaks it up, they videotape it. So, and I think other parts of gun violence are that, you take Chicago, or I would have to think that these are not legal guns that are
a lot of them are ghost guns. They're guns that they can make themselves.
So I'm fine. Again, I'm a gun owner, and I believe in the Second Amendment. And but I bought it for protecting my family, because you would take away all the people with the good guns, and only the bad people are going to have guns, and that's not a good thing. But I'm very fine with the laws that were needed, where I had the things that I had to do to get my conceal and carry permit. Whether I had to go down to Fairfield Police and get fingerprinted, I had to do a background check on me. I'm fine with that, and and I had to take an NRA safety course, and many of these things you don't.
Are those
none of these? I don't think any of these mass murderers have taken NRA safety courses.
Probably not.
Yeah. So, it's a very complicated issue.
And how do you see the issue, Jennifer?
Yeah, obviously, I very much agree with what Jim said. I think we have a big cultural, societal problem in this country, right? Gun violence is a big part of that. We have lost the ability to disagree with each other, right? We've, in many ways, lost the ability to have compassion, to be kind, to reach out and support each other. It's a gun problem, and it certainly, Jim, as you said, is complicated and complex, right? It's multi-layered. Big systemic solutions are going to be needed. But we also, have to really focus on helping each other out and supporting each other, right? Speaking up when we see something that's concerning, helping people when they're not okay, not stigmatizing them, not shaming, right? So there are many layers, I think, needed to kind of address the situation that we're faced with, which is frightening and unacceptable, frankly.
I think one of the things that was brought out in the students' comments was that the authorities, who could have some say as to stopping the problem or controlling it, haven't done anything. Just in the last month, I guess, Senators Murphy and Blumenthal led a bipartisan group in the Senate to pass gun legislation, the first time in 30 years. So the government is not keeping really up with the problem at all, I don't think. Jim, looking at your situation now, your son ended his life by hanging in 2021. Did you see it coming? Were there any signs that he was in trouble?
So it's very hard to, Kevin took his life on February 4th, 2021. But you look at the year that preceded that, okay? Kevin's 2020 was, lacrosse got canceled, right? He played on the lacrosse team.
This is all during the pandemic.
Yeah, 2020, March, lacrosse canceled. School, remote learning, okay? Then any other school-related activities got canceled, dances, so forth, okay? And then the summer trip that he went on volunteering, a group of 200, 300 people from Fairfield each year go to Appalachia, West Virginia, and it's called ASP. They make some of the most poverty-stricken places in America, and they help make homes warmer, safer, drier. Everyone who comes back on that trip is transformed, and he loved it in 2019. He was looking so forward to go back on it again. He told me that, I don't know what I want to do with my life, Dad, but I know I want to help others. And he got that from that trip.
That's great.
That was canceled.
Sounds like a transformative experience.
Yes, for sure. And the Reverend Alita Ward and Greenfield Hill Congregational Church in Fairfield, they do a great job with putting that together. But then our family trip up to Eastern Maine Canadian border, that was canceled. Okay, so, and then football was going back and forth. We are going to play, we aren't going to play. Maybe we'll play 7-on-7. Well, the refs, they're fearful for a lawsuit and they won't play. And he stopped playing football, and I couldn't blame him, because there's only so much calisthenics, speed agility drills you can do. Some kids just want to put on the helmet and hit someone, I mean, like play football. But to get back to that, it's just so hard when that's all we had to look forward to. So to see it coming, so it's hard to tell what a teenage boy is going through, right? Because I was a teenage boy once, and I was not.
They're not very communicative about their feelings.
No. I say this in the presentations. My parents were on a need-to-know basis, and they didn't need to know very much what I was trying to do. And that's a young boy just trying to have freedom, right? But they couldn't do anything. So it was almost like we treated our most vulnerable people like, well, we did. We treated our children and our elderly people like prisoners, solitary confinement. We let people die in an indignified fashion where they couldn't see their loved ones. They had to see and talk to them through like a glass. And then you have a whole generation of kids forced to learn through a screen or just hang out in their bedrooms because they couldn't do anything else. Mm-hmm. So did we see it coming? It's hard to tell, but we did see something. We were active. We were trying to get therapists. We found a therapist that he said his schedule was tight, he'll fit him in. And he did, and we were checking in with the guidance counselor and so forth. And we asked both of them, do you think he's suicidal? And they said no, he's making future plans. They had kids who were all getting ready to go. I have a lot of nieces and nephews. We're into a lacrosse family. There was a game going to be held where my nieces belong to different schools and they're playing each other. Mm-hmm. They were going to go down there during Easter weekend. Mm-hmm. He was getting up to go to school. And the comments I got from all friends and at the wake, we looked forward to going to school to see Kevin. He made classes interesting. Mm-hmm. And
he sounds like a very special boy.
I've learned so much more about my son that he's gone, but going to school, going to work. He was a lifeguard at the Westport YMCA. He had, we said, okay, if you're not going to play football, then you have to have a job. You just can't be playing Xbox all the time. Mm-hmm. So he did that 4 days a week. Mm-hmm. And, they said, no, he's not. And and in fact, the night he took his life, my wife was on the phone with one of her college friends, and she said, we think Kevin's made a turn for the better.
Hmm.
And so, no, we did not see it coming.
What do you say to parents that have children that are problematic, that are showing signs of, say, withdrawal or with some behavioral problems in school? How do you help them deal with that situation?
I think first and foremost, our kids learn from us, and we need to model for them how we want them to behave, right? What we expect from them. When we normalize in our homes and our families being able to share difficulties, talk about stresses, right? Support each other, work through bad days, difficult things, bad news, right? When we can do that, calmly in a warm and supportive environment, we show our kids we can talk about things, right? We can talk about difficult things. We can talk about hard things, and that's okay. We have to make it, and this has been said, right? We have to make it okay for people to say, I'm not okay. I didn't have a great day. I'm really struggling. And that has to be met with compassion and warmth, right? We need to really listen. I think, I'm a parent of two young boys, and I think parents, we can get so defensive sometimes, right? What do you mean everything's not okay? We're doing everything we can, right? We're giving you a good life. What could be wrong, right? And I think we need to let go of our own ego about that too. There's so many reasons why kids nowadays are struggling. Very real, very scary reasons. It's, not necessarily about us. It's not necessarily about what's happening at home. It's about school. It's about friends. It's about relationships. It's about the world, right? What they're hearing about in the world.
Don't you think also that the kids have had their lives upended during the pandemic? They were remotely taught, or they were hybrid taught, and that they missed their friends, they missed the school activities that were a big part of their life, and instead of that, they were home a lot by themselves or with their families, but very much isolated from their usual world. Now, Jennifer, you said that it's very important for children to learn that they can talk about their issues, and you also said something interesting. You said that you need to take into account the child's age and his developmental level. Could you briefly summarize what the different levels are and how you can help children in those levels talk about things that may be bothering them or maybe on their minds?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I think we can talk differently to a high schooler than we would talk to an elementary school child, right? I have two little kids. They're 5 and 2, my boys, and we play a game at dinner every night called Roses and Thorns, where they share not only a wonderful part about their day, right, something that went well, something that was fun, but also the thorn is what didn't go well, what was hard, what was stressful, what was difficult. It's a silly little thing, right? On the surface, it's a game that you play with your children to learn about their day. But what I hope that does is says to them, it's okay to talk about both sides, right? The good and the bad. It's much different with older kids, and you can get into more detail. You can be specific. You can talk to them about your own life and your own struggles, and be an example for yes, things are hard, but they can get better, right? I've felt sad. I felt stressed. I've been depressed, right? Here's what helped me, and you too can get help, right? You too can feel better. There's some really wonderful resources on how to talk to children about all different things, kind of broken down by level. They're available on our website, which I know will be shared later.
The website is www.conpsych.org, right? And that on that website there are lots of resources that people can look at and inquire about.
Yeah, so there's a lot of material to help teachers, families, parents really, have a framework for how to talk to your kids, whatever their age, appropriately in a way that will be the most effective.
Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier was social media and how social media has kind of captivated their children. What do you do when your child is addicted to screens and can't put it down? How can you help the child lessen that enrapturement with the social media? What do you say to them? What do you do, and how do you model it for them also?
Yeah, I think again we really need to lead by example, right? People ask, why are kids addicted to phones? Why are they addicted to social media and technology? And I think the thing that we need to take a look at is that they learn that from us. They learn that from adults. When we can have good boundaries and good limits with media and social media and screens, when we can demonstrate and with our children, with our families, show the value of closeness, connection, communicating, face-to-face communicating, right? We need to be able to do that, and we need to create a culture at home and in schools for kids where they can see, you know, that there's value in this, that we can't lose that real human connection, because that's what really sustains us. I think it has to start at home, and I think we need to be good role models, and that means letting go of some of our own bad behaviors sometimes.
Jim, you and your wife co-founded the Kevin's Afterglow Foundation. What have been some of your activities with the foundation? What are some of your objectives for it? Could you share that with our audience, please?
Absolutely. Our mission is to teach kids kindness, get them to be more caring, more empathetic, teach them how to give to others. We want to help. I'm like, after the fact, I'm like this quasi-expert on mental health now, pediatric mental health, and how to, you know, it's a lot for parents to go through when their child is dealing with. So we want to educate people, parents, on mental health. We want to help with the pediatric mental health crisis, which we define as COVID mitigation strategies, lockdowns, canceling of activities, has done, and masks have done a huge, I'd say, had a huge impact on a whole generation of kids. And then there's not enough doctors to treat those kids now. Okay, we had an explosion, almost like a baby boomer.
You mentioned
population.
earlier that for every 1,800 kids, there's one pediatrician.
One pediatric psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist, that's what you said. Yeah.
So, and we also want to get people to talk, and just like we're doing today. And you know, the more we talk about it, the more I find I talk about it. I'm an open book. The more people, hey, I'm going through this too, and it's common. It should be the #1 focus of our politicians.
What would you say would be, as advocates, both of you are advocates, I gather, what are some of the objectives of advocates, and how do you go about your advocacy to really try to make a difference? Jennifer, why don't you start? You mentioned earlier today that you are very much in favor of legislative advocacy, and that Connecticut actually has passed some really good laws recently assisting and promoting the mental health system in the state. Correct? Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Absolutely, and I'll start by saying we're blessed with really wonderful legislators in our state. I think people who really have shown that they care about this issue and who committed to doing things about the issues that we're talking about. What the Connecticut Psychological Association does is really try to attack the problem from a legislative angle. So we work very closely with our congressional representatives and try to really push for change where we see problems. A lot of bills were passed this year in Connecticut. There was a big focus on pediatric mental health, on children's mental health issues. And fortunately, a lot of really wonderful bills were passed that are going to give a lot of resources and funding to schools to increase access to mental health services, in addition to things like requiring wellness checks for mental health, the same way that kids go to a primary care doctor just to see if everything's okay. Like 2 mental health checkups will be covered a year by insurance, which is wonderful. We need to do more. I think our legislators need to do more. This is a big, scary problem, and we really need all hands on deck. So, you know, policy is a place to start. Policy is a place where we can really make some change.
And it sounds like that the legislatures in this state are receptive to this kind of appeal to pass mental health laws that make a difference in people's lives now. And what about insurance? That's kind of a pit, isn't it? It's kind of a hole in the system, isn't it? Do you have some experience with that, Jim?
Certainly, you know, when there is a shortage of pediatric mental health care providers. We struggled to find Kevin a therapist. We eventually did. Able to talk with him. His pediatrician prescribed him Lexapro. But in order to get a heavier dose, he needed to have an appointment with a pediatric mental health care psychiatrist. And there's not a lot of those around. We mentioned Richard just mentioned the statistic of every 1,800 kids who need one, there's only one. And
for kids of color, there's even less.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, 1,800 to 1's a pretty, that's a pretty big scenario or statistic there, ratio. But yes, I know a woman whose son took his life, and she went through 48 phone calls before they found one doctor that they could help. So it's a common problem.
Okay, are there other kinds of help though, like other families that are going through this, or other people that are savvy about mental health issues you can talk to that make a difference for you? We're actually running out of time, so we're going to have to be very brief about this.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, to me, therapy. I mean, we're after the after the fact that Kevin died. We've been in support groups.
They're helpful, aren't they? The support groups are helpful.
It does. I went through a journey where, okay, this happened. I'm a man. This happened to my life. What happens to fix it? And I needed a clear path to that. And there isn't.
There's no.
There's not.
True.
There's not.
As someone with
I'm in a much better place now.
Background myself, it's like 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
But the support groups, they were okay for me. They're definitely, I went to one that's called Compassionate Friends, and half the group was suicide, parents of suicide. The other half of group, fentanyl overdoses, and that's something that should be talked about too. But for me, the support groups didn't really work. I found normalcy, and I know that another kid, his name is Spencer Smith, he's up in Brunswick, Maine. He took his life about 4 months before Kevin did. I read the article. You might as well have put Kevin Kutso in that thing. Same exact thing. There's another boy in Chicago. Same exact thing. And so I used to have a lot of guilt over what the hell did I do to my son.
Let me interrupt just to ask Jennifer for a takeaway for the audience about our discussion. I've really enjoyed the discussion this evening. What would you say if you had to talk to people that were experiencing sort of an issue with one of their children? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say to not give up, to not ask if they're okay once, but to keep asking and keep talking to them, keep giving as much support as you can. It is hard to find help, right? We mentioned the insurance system. It is broken in really awful ways. It's one of the things that we're trying to address, but help is available. And help, it means, of course, right, sitting with a professional in a room, but also helping each other, being kind, being there for each other, creating a culture, and being a community that lifts each other up and that cares about each other. It's so important.
Amen. That's very nice. And I really appreciate both of you for coming to the program tonight to talk about these issues that matter to so many people now, and that your honesty and forthrightness is really appreciated. And this is something we need to talk about. We need to be open about. And hopefully our viewers tonight will appreciate your presence and what you had to say, and will take a word with what you had to say to maybe deal with an issue that they themselves are going through right now. So thank you so much, and